Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. Choi Sang-on delivered the policy address for 2018 entitled Seeking Pragmatic Progress for Inclusive Development. The chief executive announced an increase in subsidies for the elderly and students amid other welfare and livelihood-related policies. Measures to strengthen disaster prevention and relief work were also put forth in the wake of Typhoon Hato. To digest what's in store for the new year, we are joined by two distinguished local current affairs commentators, economist José Marques and political scientist Eilo Yu. José Marques, Eilo Yu, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us for this roundtable discussion on the policy address. I would start by Professor Yu. What do you make of Choi Sang-on's vision for next year?
Well, I think, first of all, I would say that this policy address, as you know, to many Macau citizens, no surprise, and then just people just focusing on the welfare as well as the cash handout. But if you look at the details of this policy address, it covers a lot of issues that is responding to Beijing's policy. For example, there is the Bay Area, as well as the development of smart city. And so actually this policy address pay a lot of coverage on these two issues. But of course, the address also talk about some local issue, but they have already been in the policy address for many years, but it's just a continuation of what we have been doing in the past. And so I would say that this policy address have a new gesture on Macau's government's policy to responding Chinese government's strategy in the region.
José Marques.
Well, I think Eilo just mentioned some of the very important points I would like to underline also. As a matter of fact, the vision is a given. It's a given. So it's something that goes beyond the Macau Special Administrative Region. And I would say that the Grand Bay Area integration process is really the key to understand what is going to happen in the future. And I think also it's important and to underline once again that the function for Macau, or the role for Macau to play in that Grand Bay Area region is there are three: one platform with the Portuguese-speaking countries, one center for tourism and leisure, and one base for cultural dialogue or interaction. Having Chinese culture as the base, let's say, and the other cultures as the counterpart for the dialogue. Well, I think that it's interesting that these functions are all on the soft side, meaning we are not talking about, let's say, hard infrastructure building or hard financial or international financial commitment or involvement, but we are talking about soft. And I think the term that the chief executive used in his policy address is maybe one of the term Macau soft cultural power. Is something that might be looked as maybe something refreshing, something new, but maybe it eventually it reflects this kind of positioning Macau was somehow given in this process of integration in the Pearl River Delta.
Interesting that you mentioned soft power, cultural, I wouldn't say diplomacy, but linkages, people-to-people exchanges, etc. But there's always this question, do we have the human software to truly become a powerhouse in this respect?
Well, I don't think we have enough human software for that. But we have some, let's say, foundations. We have some good foundations. Of course, historical, interculture, intercultural relations of Macau and so on and so forth. These are very soft, very, important foundations. But in terms of people, of course, we need to be much more open in that sense. I think we should really be, opening in the sense to attract also people to come over to Macau. And to develop inside Macau the instruments for us to play a role outside of Macau.
And
I think
that
is very important.
as what you say, we actually dealing with controversy that is talking about, on the one hand, we would like to have the performing arts in Macau, but at the same time, we are trying to control and restrict it. Okay, and so recently what the government talking about, trying to license people doing performing arts, that is actually have some issue in the society. And I think there is a good idea talking about when we talking about leisure and recreational center in Macau, serving at a center like for leisure and recreational. And then we got to think about, creativity issue. That is how to encourage people to be creative. And then what the government got to do is to, help them to develop performance arts as well as any other cultural activities, rather than, just keep an eye how to manage and control them.
Going beyond management and control with regards to creative industries, and I'd like to introduce here a buzzword which was not so, at least to my understanding, it was not so much there: economic diversification. And we've seen the gaming industry rebounding over the past year. There was a lot of talk about the urgent need to diversify the economy. There was a lot of talk about, of course, vertical, I shall say, diversification. There was not so much on the agenda this time.
Well, for quite sure, I would say that, casino is the giant, industry in Macau. And I think, well, we cannot change these situations, for so long. But as what the chief executive suggests in the policy address, actually in the past several years, we have been talking about the enhancements of the financial market, or having some financial products in Macau, and then we have the conventional center. We would like to do conventional center business, and this year, actually the financial secretaries will talk about, how to promote our conventional exhibitions activities in Macau through talking about conferencing, or actually it's talking about conference tourism in Macau. And I believe that, they are doing something, but well, like what you say, that is, we have not yet made great achievement for diversifications of our economy, and that is the issue. And then for sure, the casino is still contributing, most of our revenue, and that is, no way out, and that is the fact.
Mr. Marques, with regards to the gaming industry, diversification, any takeaway from this?
Well, I would say that diversification is a long and winding road.
Sure.
To where? I don't know. But the fact is, I think it will take a lot of time, I think, to if there's something that will be coming out from the process of diversification. And I think that the attitude or the concern about diversification and some measures that the government has taken, they are important. But of course, we have to be very realistic and have everything in perspective. For instance, creative industries, government has been putting quite a lot of effort to promote creative industries and even to finance creative enterprises. However, if you look at the latest figures that were published today, I think, for 2016. Well, creative industries employ 11,000 people in Macau, something like that, so minor percentage of the workforce. I think the contribution to GDP was 8.5 thousand of millions of patakas. However, the contribution to the GVA, to the gross value added of Macau economy was only 0.6%. Why? Because of course, I don't have at this particular moment a figure in regard to the contribution of the gross value added of the gaming sector, but of course it must be enormous, right? And of course, I think that the whatever the effort that government has to, or even private sectors, and I have to say, private sectors are really the key to the economic diversification. But whatever the effort they put in, I mean, it will still be very, very little in comparison with what the gaming industry can actually contribute to Macau economy.
I think another issue that is, as what I say, the conventional center. Well, we don't have, a conventional center that can accommodate, big event in Macau, except in the casino. And then actually now the casino seems to be dominating the conventional business in Macau. But the point right over here is that, if the government would like to, promote or diversify the economy, just using conventional and exhibitions activities as a means, okay, for diversifications. And then I believe that the government got to have its own body or its own company, as well as to build up the infrastructure by itself, managed by itself, and then to how to coordinate, as well as to set up different events in Macau. At the same time, you will find that when you look at the conventional industry, then you will find that we don't have much company really doing conventional business and exhibition business in Macau. Most of them are just small company, just have the event in a mall. And so I believe that this is the problem that we are facing. If we want to do it, and then the government got to have its own body to promote conventional centers as well as exhibitions activities.
And many of these small-sized companies actually rely heavily on government subsidies.
Right. But the problem that is, if we want to improve, okay, or would like to enhance the contributions of conventional center in Macau's economy, and then we should not only relying on this small company. We need to have some, big conventional center, and then we hold some international big activities, and so that this can contribute a lot.
There's always this infant industries argument to make the case for government support to this kind of activities, right? I'd like to talk about infrastructure and Typhoon Hato. As I was mentioning at the onset of our talk, well, this is the first policy address after the devastating typhoon and deadly natural disaster. And this was an issue, of course, on the agenda. A number of measures were announced. Some would say a number of these policies had already been hinted at or even announced, but now we have a bit more. José Luís Salles Marques, when it comes to disaster prevention, strengthening disaster prevention and relief work, the set of measures on the right track, would that be enough? Of course, only the future can tell us, but what do you make of this?
Well, I think that there are several measures that were announced, and of course, how they will be put together, how they will be implemented, managed, coordinated, is something that we can only we will only be able to see in the future.
Of course.
However, I think the direction should be the one that has been taken. There is one new department or a government body that will coordinate the efforts.
Civil protection or
the civil protection. I think that from the experience of Hato, it's very important that the civil protection body has some way to integrate all the civil society volunteers or organization or individuals that want to contribute to the civil protection work, as well as to take preventive measure, because prevention is really the key. Right?
Raising awareness.
Raising awareness. I think, for instance, I think that all buildings in Macau, the condominium, the management of the condominium, they should be aware of a set of rules to apply when this kind of natural disasters happen or some kind of crisis happen. I mean, there are many, many things. The government have asked each department to have a proposal or a list of measures to be taken. But I think it's very, very important to involve the civic society, because civic society, the people in the streets or in the houses or in the factory, in companies or casinos or whatever, they are the ones who have to take really the first measures, right? To save themselves, the survival measures. So it's very important to get civil society involved in this process.
The government, the chief executive, the government, different government departments, namely the Meteorological Bureau, but also Public Works Bureau, etc. They were all under fire, one shall say. They were in hot water after Typhoon Hato for the way they responded to the natural disaster. And this also entails the issue of accountability, which has been stirring up a debate.
Yeah, this is a tragedy, but at least I would say that this tragedy brings something good to us. That is, we learn something, especially the government have a lesson. And actually, in this year, when we are talking about accountability, in the past, I would say that what is accountability? I don't know. The government never talk about what is accountability. When we talk about the principal officials' accountability, they did not explain what it is. But in this year, the policy address said that we have 4 perspectives to understand accountability. Administration, that's mean talking about the rules and regulations in the administration. Second, political. Third, legal. Talk about the law, did you violate any law? And then the final one is morale. That has been first list in the policy address in Macau. And I would say that I'm happy to see that now the government try to define what is accountability. And then the question that is, when we ask for accountability, how the government can do it from these 4 perspectives. And when the Secretary for Administration and Justice, Sonia Chan, present in the legislature, and then she said that not existing, we have mechanism in dealing with accountability because based on the legal issue as well as the administrations. And even if you violate the law, and then the government can put you to the court, okay? And so, but the question is, how about political and moral approach for accountability according to the government's definition? And I hope that the government can say more when talking about political issue. What do you mean? And I would say that Mr. Fong, the former director of Fong Shui Kun, right, of the
Meteorological Bureau,
right, and then I have a sympathy to him. That is, he is a civil servant, and then he got to face, the regulations from civil servant as well as the law of civil servant law. But if he was not civil servant, what can we do? He can just resign, and then the government could not do anything on him, right? He was appointed, right, in the government and to be director. Is someone who is not civil servant but appointed to be a director. And then what we can do is just dismiss him, and then finished. The file is closed. We cannot have much work to do from the administration. Of course, we can sue him if he violated the law, but at this moment, Mr. Fong actually is a civil servant, and so that the government would like to use the civil servant law as well as the regulation, okay, to have disciplinary action over what he did during Hetto.
There's a lot of focus on for obvious reasons, for sure, on the Meteorological Bureau and the former chief. But some say it's a kind of scapegoat. What do you think?
Yes, I would say yes. That is when we're talking about political and moral accountability. Who should be responsible from this perspective? Well,
why only him? Why most?
Mr. Fong have already, carry the responsibility from the administrative and legal perspective. But who take care the political and moral?
Mr. Salles Marques, accountability and Fong Shui-kyun as a sort of scapegoat. What's your take on this?
Well, I think that the case of the Meteorological Bureau must be analyzed very carefully. We don't know the content of the report, right? I think there's some parts that were kept in secret. However, I think that on one hand, the fact that the report was written by an independent, let's say, committee or group of people, some of them we know very well and we have a lot of respect for them. So it gives us some, let's say, some guarantees that the report was done in a very rigorous way. But on the other hand, yes, the question is, what are the benchmark? Because it's easy to judge on legal issues.
Right.
Yes, no, legal, illegal.
Right.
Administrative, okay, you follow the procedure, you don't follow the procedure. Even when there you start having some, I would say, some issues in terms of evaluation, okay? Some people can say, oh, I didn't follow the procedure because in that way I save the situation, suppose, okay? When there is a storm, do you follow the procedures with doing, yeah, you see what I mean is like, okay, in the administrative field, there are already some difficulties sometimes, okay, but okay, still, I would say not so complicated. However, in the political responsibility, yes, how will those benchmarks be defined? I mean, how do you evaluate political accountability? To be fair to the politicians, let's put it this way, it's not, because the thing is, sometimes you see not in Macau, but somewhere else, right? There are some disasters and the political person that is responsible politically for that particular area just resign or is dismissed or something like that. Sometimes it doesn't happen. I mean, there's different reactions, right? And maybe all of them are okay. I mean, there's nothing too wrong about that. So what is the benchmark about the political accountability? And of course, the morale. Well, the morale, I think there are different kinds of moral issues, okay? Right. There are very different kinds of moral issues. Yeah. Some of them are straightforward, right? No question about it. It's not moral, and I would say some kind of ethic or something like that. Yeah.
Ethics.
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
ethics.
Yeah. Ethical, dispositions or something like that. I don't know. Well, I think yes. When you go into this kind of areas, which sometimes are very subjective, yes, you have to define a kind of.
And so that's why I would say
benchmark.
that this time the government would like to talk about these two weak concepts, right? We have difficult to define the political and moral responsibility, but I would say the government is bold to talk about this for the first time in Macau. The next issue there is how can we draw a benchmark or a standard, and who got to be responsible in these two perspectives. And I think, so that's why I would say Hetto is a tragedy, but it brings something good to us to think about this. I would say that, why I'm Mr. Fong have my sympathy is not because he did well, but the point is, under this, scenario, he got to take up most of the responsibility, and the public are angry against him. But the question is, I would also like the public to think about if we would like to have someone to be accountable and responsible for what they did, and from what perspective they're asking for it. Okay, are you asking through the administration as well as the law, or you're talking about moral and political standard? And then what do you mean? It is fair to say that Mr. Fong got to take care of this political and moral perspective. I don't know, but I hope that the public got to think deeply about this issue, and this is what the government suggests for the first time in this process. I hope we got to have a reflection from head to.
And one final topic, which is a huge portfolio. I'm talking about transportation, housing, public works. We are somehow touching upon some of these issues. For sure, we haven't seen Secretary Raimundo do Rosário delivering his sectoral policy address that will take place next week. But question now is, what about the housing woes of Macau and transportation? Some lawmakers, right after Choi Sai-on's policy address, were saying he said little about this. At least they were not satisfied with what they had heard. Were you expecting more in this respect, Eilo?
Well, I would say that, if you look at what the city is developing, I don't think that the government can do more than existing. Especially, yes, we reclaim the land, but in terms of the urban planning, as well as the constructions, the government seems not that efficient to dealing with this growing demand. And I would say that in the policy address, the chief executive have already talked about, to increase the supply of public housing in the Zone A, and then but how about Zone B and C and D, right? The government had not yet finished the planning, and so I would say, yes, he is doing what he can, but the question is, are they doing in their full capacity to think about how to plan the other zones? And that is the point. I believe that the public, of course, for quite sure, they are not happy. And even I would say that, what does the government suggest? For 10,000 new public housing in Zone A cannot fulfill the demand. For quite sure, I would say. But the question is, what is the next step? What will the government do? And I think that is the point. I believe the bureaus as well as the secretary got to give a picture to the people that what will coming, and then that is important.
A survey carried out by the General Union of Neighborhood Associations, known as CAIFONG, mostly among local youths, was hinting at this, that, well, it's not a surprise that housing ranks pretty high on people's worries and concerns alongside transportation. José Salles Marques, what else can the government do? What should be put forth to give some hope to those who are or feel helpless when it comes to owning or renting an affordable property?
Yes, I think that besides planning and announcing the construction of new buildings or houses for public housing, I think the government should revise the criteria or standards for public housing, namely the size of the houses, the quality of construction, and so on and so forth. There should be some studies or some plans in regard to what we call the not the social housing but the economic housing, because most of Macau people are maybe into that category. Right? I mean, nowadays you have to be a millionaire to be to be able to get yourself a non-economy housing, but just the normal market and the normal market price. And so I think that there should be some revision, not only in terms of what and how much supply of those kind of housing should be put into the market, but also the scheme to get into to access those houses. Not only in regard to who are or who should not be able to access those houses, but also how the finances can be worked out. There are different ways to handle that. And there are ways that eventually can make the life of people easier and not have young couples. I am very, very worried about that. Have young couples, having loans to pay for their entire life,
right,
or entire working life. I think this is not a good society. We cannot live in a society where you have to pay your house loans for the rest of your entire life.
If you are lucky enough to have enough funds for the down payment, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just to start with that.
Yes,
so
start
it's
with.
very complicated. I think there's a lot of things to do. Yeah.
Sure. One last question we did not address because, of course, when you talk about the policy address, it's a wide range of topics, pretty comprehensive. But in the case of administration and justice, well, the Secretary Sonny Chan, just a few days before Choi Sang-on's policy address, announced the public consultation on the future municipal institution. José Salles Marques, you were the last mayor of Macau. You had the Leal Senado and the Provisional Municipal Council before it became the Institute for Civic and Municipal Affairs Bureau, the Civic and Municipal Affairs Bureau, I shall say, IACM, and now it will be turned into IM, I believe, the Municipal Institute or Institution. Very quickly, in a nutshell, your take on this and on the fact that there will be no elected members of this body.
Well, to start with just a joke, okay?
Yes.
Well, I'm very happy because I will continue to be the last mayor for some time.
Yes. So there will be
for some time. Yes. But then, okay, talking about it more seriously, I think there was never intention to have election for the municipal bodies. I think from the very beginning, this was what was, I would say, in the table, although not so clearly stated as it is now. But anyway, my take on this is that the reform of the municipal bodies was somehow only triggered by the need to have the representative of municipal bodies in the electoral committee of the chief executive. So that was the only, if not the only, maybe 90% of the reasons why the reform exists. So this is my take on it.
Eilo, this is a non-political municipal body, as it is spelled out in the basic law. Why not having elected members?
Well,
even if they
have already interpreted
yes.
that the basic law, there is a, is a kind of, when
is that the case that
when there are, elected member, this is political. This is the interpretations by Beijing, I would say. And so there is, this new body got to be accepted by Beijing. And so Beijing have already, interpreted the basic law by saying that, if there is elected member, this is political. And so we cannot say anything on this. And the issue right over here is that I would rather suggest, okay, if we would like to have some, representative who are selected by the people, I would rather have a suggestion that, you can think about this. When we have a 3 district advisory committees, right? And then shall we have some of them elected into this advisory committee, and then the chief executive can appoint some of the elected members from this committee into the, consultative committee of the new municipal organization. And then that can be a kind of indirect elections by having a convention that the chief executive would like to, appoint some elected members from the district levels advisory committee, and this can serve part of the purpose. I'm not saying that this can to totally respond to public demand, but at least public can have a certain kinds of participations that is to influence who can be the members into the municipal organization.
Well, this would take us for another half an hour, I would say, but I think there's plenty of food for thought here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Eilo, Professor Salles Marques, for joining us on this roundtable discussion with regards to the 2018 policy address. And to you at home, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.